People who come to practice often complain to me that they work in an office with people who are fishermen or hunters. So these are people who take everything from life, and they have this very specific kind of pleasure. It's very hard to be in the same room with them. It's incredibly tough. So it's very difficult for these people to be around them. So what to do about this? If you try to talk to a person with whom it is very difficult to communicate, what do you think, according to the law of karma, is happening? So, any suggestions? Yes? Past or future? Yes. If in this life you start to degrade, you will reincarnate badly. So in the future you will be born in the world as a human someday. Now, you can see what awaits you if you degrade. But if you are not going to degrade, then make every effort and maybe you will see your past right now. That is, who you were in the past and what problems you caused to those who were moving along the way of self-development. This is interconnected. What are your opinions on this? Anything else to say? Any comments on this? How? From one side, yes, but not only communicate with them, but practice yourself. Of course, this is true, exactly. A man is known by the company he keeps. Sometimes you get relief for a certain time, then you go back to your society, and everything will come back. But this is not bad, right? Respectively, if you work on yourself, then you will influence the people around you. That's why, if you feel that this mechanism is working only on one side, understand that this mechanism also works the other way. It's not to you, but from you to someone else. It's like a credo of yoga aura camp. Change yourself, and the world will change around you. It works absolutely, 100%. And there is a certain meaning in this. So, okay. Does anyone want to add any personal practice? Yes. I want to repeat, Mahabandha, what I was talking about before, is a combination of internal locks, which is Mula Bandha plus 2 more bandhas. But this is quite another story. I repeat one more time. Experience shows that while you are a normal social person, you can never do this bandha. Of course, you can try to do it, but this bandha is possible only if there is no apanavayu. But you can work with it when the apanavayu energy is weak. Then you can do bandha. While this energy is strong, you will never do bandha. So, of course, you can flex your muscles, thinking you have muscles there, trying to contract them, but it's quite useless. It took me a minimum of 3 years to learn how to do bandhas. To tell the truth, I was shown, and I thought, cool, I can do it. So then, after 3 years, I finally learned how to do it correctly. I realized that this is how it is supposed to be done. But this is trivia. It's necessary to work on a multitude of things. And, answering your question, this yoga training is good, of course. Try at home to sit as much as possible with crossed legs. The flow of energy will already start changing. Then, try to sit in half lotus. That is, when you have one leg pulled up like this. But I repeat once more, you should work on a multitude of things. There are some people who do not much hatha yoga, but they do Buddhist practices. Mainly the reading of Buddhist texts and the recitation of mantras. But there are certain practices that require good posture. When people sit well, I mean, with crossed legs. Only through patience can he read the book and tolerate the discomfort at the same time. For example, a person performs some ritual and tolerates the discomfort. Patience completely eliminates all negative reactions. When you suffer and sit, what is happening? Those negative karmic aspects that are energetically stamped in your legs, you are changing them. This changing allows increased flexibility in the joints and other things. In other words, patience helps you to overcome your current energy. In this case, the patience is you sitting with crossed legs only. Some asanas I recommend to all people. There is a special asana for warriors, Vajrasana. Usually, warriors have big hips, and it is very difficult for them to settle in Padmasana. Well, imagine that I have hips twice as big as mine. If I had such hips, yes, my leg would be in this position. The pressure would increase on the knee and also on the hip joint, just because of the thickness of the thigh. If you have ever watched videos of Indian yogis, you will have noticed that 95% are skinny and thin. That is, that they have put on weight when they have an ashram and many pupils. When the pressure on them is so strong, they can't engage in personal development, and they feel the strain. Then they start eating, move less, and put on weight. But this, in general, when you... And this is if you are sitting, but it is very seldom. Actually, if such Guruji grow fat, when I say they grow fat, so I don't blame them if they can accept their pupils, then it is already good. If their pupils make some progress. From this point of view, I would remind you of something. There is one man named Iyengar who promotes yoga to people in the West. In Russia it is also popular, but this man even writes the following in his own memoirs. Iyengar is a very eccentric person. He has a very unique style. He says something like, "People criticize me for beating my pupils with a stick." No, why are you laughing? It's serious. He always walks around the room with a stick, and he uses the stick in two ways, as a tool for two purposes. The first is when he helps a student with an asana. For example, this morning, we did the Parshvakonasana. So Iyengar would walk up to you and rest the stick against your leg or arm. And if the stick was more straight than your body, he would help you straighten your body with the stick. But this is not tolerated. Okay, I am joking. Of course, actually, this is not the point. Something else Iyengar says. You have no idea what I have under my clothes. I think he was talking about scabies. I am itching all over, so I beat them. But then all their problems pass to me. It really is the truth. All teachers who are developing themselves. For example, this girl. She's not a teacher yet, but even she noticed that after talking with somebody, that person's problems came to her. Suppose, please, that a person doesn't allow himself to eat sweets. It means that a problem came to him that he can't overcome. He cannot allow himself to do it. What will happen with him? Will he suffer? Get a cold? What? Did he not have enough of that sweet cake? But I'm talking about you. If such a person encounters such energies which don't allow them to function normally, these energies come from students, pupils, from those who concentrate. So these energies begin to negatively influence people on a physiological level. Yesterday we spoke about why Sri Aurobindo left this world with cancer, and other teachers who die through sickness. It's because of the amount of energy that comes to them. Teachers don't have the resources to deal with all this new energy. Any teacher lives primarily through their own resources. Oh, it's hard to explain it. Well, in short, the teacher is a medium, roughly speaking. That is, of course, he can, through his own practices, generate a certain amount of energy. But most of this energy he gets from his own spiritual path, from life to life. And his small physical body is such a small relay. And accordingly, when the amount of concentration on this teacher increases significantly, then that source, which came to him on a regular basis, is no longer enough. It's recommended to such practitioners or teachers if the physical body begins to hurt in some way or another. And the answer to the question that I asked you, that is, what will happen to him? He would get some kind of physical disease, because usually there is not only one energy that comes, but a whole bunch of energies, and they pressurize the person, causing him to do what they want. Do you understand? But if you watched the movie last night, you will realize how many variations are possible with lavas. A certain number of lavas come to a practitioner. Why do they come? I will explain. There is a theory, if we assume there is a man, the recipient, a disciple who came to the teacher, but according to his karma, that student is under the influence of some parasitical lava. According to the law of karma, I will give you an example. This Jivatma in past lives worked in food production, and this person made sweet things. What is a sweet thing? Perhaps you don't know about this, but why do people have a sweet tooth? Why do you think? Any more opinions? Lack of energy? Yes. What else? Any more suggestions? Why? Why do people become addicted to sweets? Yes, it is a light drug, a legal drug. That is, people eat candy and it produces so-called energy. The truth is that it is the energy of digestion. He does not get energy from the candy. The candy is a stimulant, yes. A human spends his own internal energy. And if this person in his past lives helped to stimulate these energies in other people, according to the law of karma, in this life, he must return this energy, and lavas will drain him. It will be like a dog trapped by his instincts. He will not be able to know anything outside his addiction. He will find some theory that sweets help the mind to work better, so he oinks like a pig with his honey or sweets. But that is his karma. And then he comes to yoga to deal with all this. He starts to affect the flow of his energy. It is natural that the flow of energy begins to change, and his tastes and preferences also begin to change. But his lava then sees all this happening and responds with outrage. I was implementing my plan, and then you decide to go and do some yoga. So what is this yoga? I'll go take a look. And accordingly, the yoga teacher collects all these lavas. Someone feels better, but someone has to recycle all this rubbish in order to help. It's all right, but this is the balance of energies. And accordingly, if the teacher collects a lot of these energies, they wear on him slightly at first. They say to him, go on, have a bite. It doesn't matter that it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Go to the fridge. Eat anything you want. And he says, no, I can't. Are you crazy? Eat at 2 o'clock in the morning? I'm just kidding. After that, the energy begins to increase a lot. It begins to put pressure on the person through illness or some other way. If you are a yoga teacher, then you have probably noticed this. If you are giving a big seminar, if you have not 5 people in the group, but 50, for example, you gave the seminar and you come back home. None of you has given a 50 people seminar? Well, what happens after the seminar? Who knows? Any opinions or suggestions? Well, if your refrigerator contains the right things, there's nothing bad there. Opening it doesn't help. Feeling stupid, dull, weak. It's much worse when you have to be active, but you feel totally empty. So, in reality, the theory of lavas that affect human consciousness is very strong and very painful. And to my great regret, it does exist in this world. So let's return to teachers. Many teachers know about this very well. Therefore, when they create problems for a student, they actually help him. That is, they are trying to help this student to advance. If you read the ancient writings, for example, in the tradition of Karma Kagyu, or those teachers who came before Karma Kagyu was formed, they had very strict relationships with their students. Just read the stories of Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, and Milarepa. They are legendary yogis. Read about their way and how they came to yoga. It's incredibly tough. There are things impossible for the average person to bear. There are illegal things. We're not going to discuss this. Anyway, there were such teachers. Okay, I will tell you, seeing as I've already begun. Tilopa was an advanced practitioner who spent most of his life in meditation. According to the accounts, he looked quite strange. I don't remember what colour his body was, but it was something like a tiny blue man with red eyes. This description is the most mild, in fact. And most of the time he sat in meditation. He sat for months in meditation. And on very rare occasions he broke his meditation. He did some things in social life. His disciple met him first while meditating, then looked for him for a long time until he found his physical body. And he lived near him, waiting until his master came out of meditation. He wanted to ask him about his methods of self-improvement. Because he saw his master sitting in meditation for several months, he thought, okay, I'll try it. And he sat down in front of him. And what do you think happened after 5 minutes? Well, or maybe an hour. Do you understand what the difference is? And he was thinking, maybe he knows something that I don't know. I should learn about it. So, how can he sit for such a long time here? This is not normal. It's fantastic. He also knows that the teacher can transfer his consciousness and do a lot of other wonderful things. After a few months of meditation, his teacher, without saying anything, gets up and goes to town. The student follows him. The teacher finds the tallest building in the town, and he goes up to the 12th floor, if I'm not mistaken, and he says, if I had a disciple, he would jump off this building with no hesitation. So, the disciple, who had waited for his master for several months, jumps off without hesitation and falls to the ground. And the teacher comes down and stands next to him and says, what has happened to you? And the disciple, all broken to pieces, says, and by the way, back then they were communicating in a very poetic way, which was absolutely sublime. Anyway, he lays there with broken legs and arms and says, how to say it, my fragile vessel is broken and full of pain. Well, something like that, but it's quite sublime. And the teacher says in the same style, notice, this is the truth, the meaning approximately, you shouldn't allow your body to ossify. Then the teacher cured him with the energy of his hands, and the disciple stood up like he had never fallen. The fractures were gone, and he walked. There were many such cases, very strange, to put it mildly. He put him through certain tests. From one point of view, he tested him. From another, he guided him. But I repeat, it happened before he became Tipola's disciple. So, how to find a teacher when you don't know his name, his surname, or the town in which he lives? It's very difficult, isn't it? Therefore, he was looking for him in his visions. For example, there was once a dog lying in his way. The dog was very ill, and there were worms in the dog's body. The dog was laying and whining, and this student came over to that dog. He looked at it and saw that it was quite disgusting. Somehow, he managed to take it and pull it off the road. And he takes one step back from it, and immediately the dog disappears. And his future teacher appears in the air and says that everything in this world is illusory. Step out of your superficiality. Then you will find your teacher faster. Such a form of education actually existed. That is, he saw that this teacher was able to greatly change reality. That is why I recommended, if you want to understand yoga a little deeper, that you should read biographies. I will write it down. Okay, you understand all this. I will wipe it out. My handwriting is difficult to read anyway. Nevertheless, I'll write it. Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa. It was either Rachungpa or Gampopa, I don't remember who was first, and then came Karnapa. In this way, Karma Kagyu was formed. The school of Buddhism which exists now is rather developed. It began after the students of Milarepa set it up, but the life stories of these four Guruji were incredible. By the way, there are not many of those, and they are very strange. The translation of their stories is very strange. I've always thought that maybe their enemies worked on the translation. But nevertheless, if you have karma in one form or another with these teachers, you will catch the essence, despite all the rubbish. This essence will allow you to follow the path. If you don't have this karma, so you will find there some oddities. I will give you an example of one such oddity. Tilopa got up from meditation and went somewhere. He went in silence. The student followed after him. A royal wedding procession came towards him. There was a prince and his princess, his future wife. Riding in the chariot, surrounded by the army as usual, and so on. So the teacher says to his students, if I now had a normal student next to me, he would have gone. Why are you laughing? Well, I admit that he asked him to do some not quite correct things. Anyway, he went up to the prince and the princess and proposed entering into a sexual relationship with the princess, with the wife of the prince. Naturally, he was beaten up, and when he was nearly dead, the master approached them and said, "What has happened here?" Yes, he tried it on with the princess. Then he too kicked his disciple a couple of times and said, "That's outrageous." So, when you read this, you will likely think that they are all mad. Okay, but the point is, of course, when they had stopped beating him, the master cured him with his hands and gave him energy. All the bruises disappeared, and he went off like he had never been beaten. But what's the point of all this? You know, asceticism. The more a person suffers within reasonable limits, the smarter he gets. And the man who lives in comfort, the dumber he gets. So, unfortunately, this is a principle of life. Well, once again, there are many strange things in these biographies, but a certain essence you will see. For example, in a text, there are a number of lines on a page. If 10 different people will read it, they will focus on probably 10 different things. Somebody who wants to have a laugh, he will laugh at the line where somebody swears. He could find it funny. Haha, how foolish, and so on. This is the level of his development, and he notices that which is equal to it. Another person notices other things. The third person finds his things, the fourth something else, and so on. It depends on the level of development. But the point, once again, is read about the yoga that once existed. Obviously, when the training was completed, Naropa became a legendary figure. He was a mega-guru, that is, a teacher who, with his abilities, eclipsed all theoreticians who existed back then. Theorists are philosophers. They are people who can read books and talk only about what is written in the books. But regarding their own practice, they do not do anything generally. They can't. And therefore Naropa stood out very strongly among these theorists. He was a real Guruji who could do incredible things, who taught Marpa to transfer consciousness. Naropa had many students. Towards the end of his life, he was an incredibly respected teacher. His students literally did not let him walk. If Naropa needed to go somewhere, then his students picked up what he was sat on and carried him. If it was needed, they would carry him for many kilometers. Strange disciples, right? Why is it they would do anything for him? Do you know? Any opinions? Why? Asceticism? Yes, to serve in the first place. Because if you can do something for someone who is evolutionarily above you, you will get some of their energy, because you keep his energy of life. For instance, there is an account of when he went for the last time to Nalanda Monastery. A huge procession accompanied him. He certainly could have walked, but he was practically carried all the way. He was an incredible guy. But nevertheless, Naropa, among all these thousands of students, particularly noticed Marpa as the bearer of the most precious knowledge. Every yoga teacher has certain practices that they cannot tell anybody about, because any person who begins to do yoga, any type of yoga, and I've never seen an exception to this rule. A man is a personality. At the center is Jivatma. Here are the layers of personality which were formed at different stages of his life. From this world, as from past lives, he brought some obscurations. Here is the so-called soul. Therefore, any person who begins to engage in self-improvement must go through the facets of his personality that will be very ugly and will maybe have a bad smell. If there is egoism, then the egoism will be of catastrophic proportions. It will outshine everything. If there are any desires or passions, then those will become colossal too. Maybe everything I tell you right now is absolutely irrelevant to you. And if you live as an ordinary, average person who regularly throws away his energy, then you will never face this. Those problems you may face only if you try to control those energy processes through which you throw away your energy. Then the energy will be accumulated and will always create a pressure on your internal world. I don't think there are many people who would like that. During this period, relatives will abandon this person because he destroys all his relationships. A tight man will also destroy his relationships with everybody. Therefore, a teacher is needed, because the teacher will tolerate any nonsense of his student, or at least help him to overcome it. How? Those students could be jailed for what they do. If a man loses control of himself, he could be locked up until the destructive behavior stops. In Tibet, they still practice this. Such a person will be confined to a cave, and the entrance blocked with stones to prevent him from running away. This nonsense is manifested in almost everybody. There are scriptures that say that if you want to reach wisdom, you need to define your own madness. Then you really can become a wise man. But this period is dangerous. Many years ago, so there are some practices that can generate a colossal amount of energy. A person who does those practices can, with the help of his own egoism, do a lot of nasty things. Therefore, certain practices can be passed on only to those who have gone through difficult tests. To be honest, I don't want even to talk about this subject, because, well, once again, it's not for everyone, to put it mildly. Well, Marpa received Poa from Naropa. Poa is the transfer of consciousness and many other techniques that allowed him, to say the least, to stand out from the crowd. So what is power, or transfer of consciousness? I'll give you an example. It was very hard for Marpa to find Naropa. Finally, he found him, had his initiations and served him a lot. In the end, he became a person who could do incredible things. For example, I will tell you one of the stories. Marpa and his students were sitting on the bank of a river. There are techniques that allow you to get energy from water. When water flows before you, sit down and concentrate on the flow, and due to this concentration on the stream, you will receive this energy. If you are not ready and have heard my lecture, you might think, oh, you can get energy from water, how cool, that you can run to the river, sit down and begin to receive the energy. And what will happen then? What do you think? If you have an unprepared consciousness, if you can't control the flow of energy, it will be lost anyway. This is equal to someone pouring for you 200 grams of vodka, or even a half litre, and then asking you, drink this please, then we will see what happens. Well, I think you're all adults, and you know that a man can become quite weird. Therefore, engaging in such practices is recommended only if a person has already overcome, as Patanjali says, the first steps of yoga, yama and niyama, when he has already laid some base of morality, or has accumulated a certain amount of energy or knowledge which allows him to control himself when he faces tough times. It will be difficult for several reasons. For example, there was a tradition in Nalanda that was destroyed more than 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago, this tradition existed. If you want to study Hiva Jitantra, then you have to take this text, sit in a room, and read it at least 12 times. The texts are very long, and the students have to know it off by heart. What do you think this is for? Obedience? But there should be a reason, right? Not just some pervert forcing a student to read a text many times. They were wise people, so why do you think they did it? Yes, you're right. From one side, to understand the text, etc.
Какие еще варианты? Да, вот вы более верно говорите. То есть вы правильно сказали, с одной стороны, и текст, понять и так далее.
The text's essence could not be understood only by downloading it inside yourself. But that text that was inside you from previous lives will find the connection with the reading. It happens if a person starts concentrating on a certain text. Little by little from his inner world, information will be released about this text, and he will be able, at a very deep level, to understand certain things. This technique works 100%. There are some things inside you. These texts are recommended to create a connection. Then, during this practice, a person will get the experience much quicker. There is a term, realization of practices, the realization of methodology. When you take a methodology and begin to implement it, I will repeat again, it is not for the physical body, it is more for your mind. It is work with your mind. When you are using your mind in order to achieve some control, at a minimum over yourself and at a maximum control over external objects that you try to influence in one way or another, that is, only when the internal and external merge will you reach a full understanding of the methodology. Do you understand? So, Marpa sat with his students on the bank of the river. They were practicing getting the energy from the water. They had already mastered yama and niyama, that is, the students had been through asceticism and service, so they could get the energy that can be properly used. And suddenly, on the other side of the river, a deer was running. Arrows were sticking out of the deer's body. The river was quite torrential. In the middle of the river, the flow knocked him over and the deer was drowned. Then, the flow brought him to the riverbank, but the deer was already dead. And Marpa said, well, okay, because they lived in Tibet and life was tough, they had dogs. and dogs need to be fed with meat. Dogs cannot get meat for themselves. Therefore, they need to get that meat somehow or buy it. But here they have a whole deer, and it was a month's worth of meat for the dogs. So Marpa said, well, now we can stock up on this meat. And he enters into meditation and says to the students, I will leave my body, then you take my body back home. Accordingly, he goes into meditation, and the deer begins to move. Its hooves start moving. It stands up and walks alone to Marpa's house. The students brought the body of Marpa to his home, so Marpa comes out of the deer's body and goes back into his own. But there were hunters following this deer's footprints, and the hunters came too. They were trailblazers, so they came and said, this is our deer. And Marpa said, not at all. This is our deer. But the hunters insisted, here are our arrows. Here is my arrow. No, says Marpa, your deer drowned in the river. This is our deer. How is this possible? His students explained that this deer, in fact, died in the river. Marpa just pulled it out and brought it here to use as meat for the dogs, and the hunters didn't believe his story. Marpa says, well, look, and he sits in meditation and enters and animates the deer's body. The deer stands up, walks around Marpa a couple of times, and then falls over. Marpa again comes back to life in his body, and so the hunters realize that okay, everything's getting serious now. Imagine if a person who has such capabilities was selfish, for example. I mean, a person who can carry consciousness into another body. It's clear what this is all about, isn't it? This is very serious, and there are precedents, unfortunately, that happen when... Well, let me give you another example. There was one state, so to speak, which was a parasite and brought a lot of problems to surrounding countries. A huge amount of problems. A queen ruled in that country. Well, it was a matriarchy there. The queen was practically a demon, and they were not just causing problems to people, they were literally cannibals. And they were catching and eating people. But it was such a developed and powerful state. They were strong, but they had this macabre peccadillo. Perhaps it was only the people of the higher caste that ate people, and everyone else in the state that was a stupid warrior that did only what they were told. Anyway, in another country there was this yogi, a woman who had learned to transfer her consciousness and to do many other things. And that yogi did something. And by the way, she had a husband. At first, she reincarnated. Actually, she did not really reincarnate. She came at night to the country of that demonic woman and took her mind out, or maybe reincarnated her to somewhere else. She then entered the body of the demonic woman. Then she also took out the mind of her own husband and put it into the demonic woman's husband's body. Accordingly, they began to live differently and gradually changed the worldview of that society. In short, they all became vegetarians later, after a number of decades. She was able to change the society and completely reformat them. And she explained to them that the tastelessness of these bloody sacrifices. So there you go. There are quite a lot of these examples in yoga. If you are interested, read the specific literature. You will find out more. Now imagine, that yogini did all this with her good intentions. That demonic state was stopped from harming others. And imagine if some demon got the same ability, beginning to possess people and influencing them. Have you heard of such a thing as being possessed? A person can be completely normal, then some kind of energy begins to affect him strangely. It is possible that possession can also be in not such a demonic form, such as when the person possessed shakes and has foam coming out of their mouth, etc. The person can smile and may not even be noticeable that it is in fact no longer a man, but a demon. And this demon can do anything. It's unfortunate that on this planet now, many people are not really human. This is the belief, anyway. There is a hidden world filled with energies that parasitize from one person to another. That is, they affect reality to serve the needs of the parasitic entity, not the person whose body it possesses. Oh well, and judging by the fact that all of you people are adults, you can see what is happening in the world when strange decisions are taken. Then you will understand that this phenomenon does exist, and that there are certain things like this that can be given only to people who are moral, spiritual, who have been through all their madness that could theoretically come to them according to their karma, and who, accordingly, can already control themselves, because such practices are necessary. Marpa, for example, planned to give this Poa ability to his son, but Marpa had a very strong school in Tibet. That is, many of his students had tremendous potential. Marpa had, if I'm not mistaken, 7 sons. I honestly don't know whether all of them were from Dagmima or from different women. Marpa had many wives, you see. He had wives in all the countries he lived. But it is believed that he had 7 sons, probably only with Dagmima, who was his main wife and who lived with him in Tibet. Although in the scriptures, but once again it was the Indian scriptures, it's written that Marpa had the most intimate relationship with an Indian wife. But once again, this is an Indian interpretation of events. Here, well, in general, these 7 sons were outstanding men, who accordingly put in a lot of effort. During the cold time of the year, they were engaged mostly in meditation. That is, Marpa passed on the teaching of concentration, the development of certain facets of the mind, so to speak. For 6 months they were sitting in meditation. For half the year they did not leave the room, and they were engaged only in practice. Dagmima and the younger students were providing them with food. That is, they were preparing a meal there and cleaning up. I will tell you another story about what obstacles can occur on the path of great practitioners like Marpa. Marpa had a son who was the most outstanding practitioner. But what does the most outstanding really mean? That he mastered the techniques to perfection in a very short period of time. And what does this mean? Yes, that he knew all these techniques before. Marpa only helped him to remember that and to master them again. So therefore he had high expectations of him. And they were sitting in one of those half-year practices when Mara decided to intervene. Mara is a deity that controls all the parasitic entities that exist on this planet. When a larva sucks the energy from someone, it is done by the order of Mara. That's the theory. And Mara was annoyed by the fact that the school of Marpa had developed so well. So Mara wanted to make certain adjustments. So he did the following. Mara has the ability to influence the mind of any person. But if you're a smart person, then your mind is like an open door for Mara. Mara may enter your mind and, using your tongue, say whatever he wants. And you can even forget what was said. Believe me, I've seen it many times. I've seen it many times in different people, practitioners who know each other very well. One says to the other something, then, after a while, the other says, "Remember, you told me that." And the other says, "No, I don't remember. This is not possible. It's playing you for a fool." Many times I've seen it, believe me. I've just stopped being surprised. Mara has a special, specific energy. If it enters the body, you will feel the energy. You will feel it 100%. There is a very strong energy called apana, and a person becomes very weird. When Mara speaks, you should just wait for it to pass. You should just wait until it is all said and finished. Throw it out, discard it, until the energy is not corrected. There is no reason to listen to that person, because there is simply no purpose. Well, in general, that is the reality. Mara affects greatly the human consciousness, and a man can say anything. And this is necessary for Mara, because he has a plan. And the same thing happened with Marpa's son. He was sitting in a closed room, practicing and concentrating. I hope you all understand why it is not recommended to leave the place of practice. Everyone understands that, right? After the beginning of the lecture. No? Okay. Let's imagine there is a man who has started doing yoga. Until he gets some results, he does not leave. The question for you is, why? Well, he can run if he wants. Why, you said? At the beginning, after communication with others, what happens? You were talking about it. What was it you said at the beginning? What was that? That's right, the influence of others. That is, the person came out of reclusion, communicated, and then went back to reclusion. And then what? He has to start again from the very beginning. Therefore, it's not recommended to communicate with people who are still living for their desires. Anyway, the window in Marpa's son's room faced the street, and he could hear what was happening on the street. Two little old ladies were going by, and they began to talk at Mara's command. So one woman said, "Look, what a nice big house Marpa has built for himself." And the other said, "Yes, they are prominent people of Tibet. Soon there will be a big celebration, a big holiday. But now they're all in reclusion. Nobody will be able to bring the mandala to the festival. Oh, what a nightmare, it's so bad. And the whole holiday has gone down the drain." So several people were talking in such a way. Accordingly, this motivated the boy to go to this celebration instead of being with his dad. Making a mandala or other things was just a way of manipulating his ego, which he still had at that time. Then his mother came to bring him some food, and he left her a note saying something like, "Mum, so-and-so, the celebration is coming soon. It would be bad if no one makes the mandala and does not make an offering. Let me do this, and then I will come back." So his mum said, "Listen, son, it's very dangerous and generally forbidden to go out of reclusion. It is believed that if a man comes out of reclusion, it's a very bad sign. It's believed that Mara can affect such a man as he wishes. A man can become dangerous. Anything can happen." Well, anyway, he insisted, so she said, "Well, fine." The mind of the woman, you see, succumbed to his geopolitical arguments. He said, "If, at this festival, we do not represent our clan, our family, other people will do anything to make their position stronger." Well, she agreed. She said something like, "Yes, we still need to continue our lineage." But she warned him. I can't tell you exactly what she said, but she gave him, I believe, 6 or 8 conditions, things that he should not do. So he could not drink, laugh, sit for a long time, chat, or ride a horse. Because at these festivals there are usually horses that are used. Well, in short, she told him specifically not to ride a horse. Nevertheless, when he came to the celebration, he broke all these promises to her. That is, he did everything she told him not to do. And then came his distant relative, who gave him a horse. And he said, "Here, I'll give you a horse." And the horse was some rare breed. And he said, "Well, sit on this horse, my nephew. Show what an exceptional horse this is." Well, at first he refused, and then he thought, yes, geopolitically it was necessary. So he sat on the horse. And I'm only telling you the picture of the visible reality of what happened. So let us imagine what was happening on the internal level with all those people that were doing all these things. Ultimately, it's believed that Mara came into the mind of a bird. A bird was sitting in the bushes, past which Marpa's son rode the horse. He began to gallop by these bushes where the bird was sitting. And when the horse jumped, the bird flew out suddenly. The horse was scared, lost its balance, and the rider fell off. His foot stuck in the stirrup, and his horse dragged him for a long way. His head, as they say, well, the skull was cracked, and even Marpa, with all his abilities, could not do anything to help. He could only help him poa, that is, transfer his consciousness. At that time, the student had already mastered poa, that is, he could transfer his consciousness, regardless of the fact that he was young. He seemed to quickly recall the technique and mastered it in this lifetime. And so they started to transfer the consciousness of his son. You should read it yourself. Well, I'll tell you the story anyway to the end. It might motivate you to read it for yourself. So in the end, his son dies and Marpa cannot do anything. They organize a special mandala. All the students gather together and channel their energy to the body of this guy. And Marpa explains to him what to do. Then they found a dead bird and Marpa went into Samadhi. There he learned that in India, far from Tibet, right at that moment a boy was dying. But he was dying not because it was his time, but because of the circumstances. The boy had some kind of disease. Well, that was the only boy who was close to them and who could be revived. So they transferred the consciousness of Marpa's son into the body of that boy. But since it was far away and it was necessary to fly over the Himalayas, they found a dove which had recently died. They took the dove and gave it the consciousness of the son. And Marpa explained how to fly to India, the directions to that place. But the weather was bad and the dove came back after a while. He could not find his way to that town to which he was supposed to fly. So Marpa and his students made a mandala once again. Again, he gathered up all the energy and gave it to this dove. So the dove flew again. In the end, he found this place. But the boy had already been carried to the cemetery. I don't remember the exact details. I think the boy's parents hadn't left. They were still mourning there. And therefore the little dove flew up close to the boy. And the boy came to life and began to stir, and the parents were overjoyed. But soon they realized that it was not actually their son, that he was behaving quite strangely. Well, anyway, he explained to them, so and so, yes, indeed, I am not your son. The body of your son was not in use, so I took it. Milarepa's student found this boy many years later. He was already an adult. I think Gampopa, if I'm not mistaken, or Rachungpa found him. And after many years, when Rachungpa was in India, the whole story was known to all. He found this boy and talked to him. He was also still engaged in self-development, but he never came back to Tibet, because from his point of view, in India there were more suitable conditions, both for development and for self-improvement. Now, so these stories may motivate you a little bit to work with yourself, not only focus on your body. I only showed you the verge of yoga, which is located on the inner level. You have heard and read, mostly from beautiful, fashionable magazines about the body. Yoga improves the body, right? But that's not the actual truth. The body is only a tool. You are using Hatha Yoga to prepare your body to deal with internal practices. Of course, what I told you about the transfer of consciousness, etc. In the best case, 0.00001% of people would be able to do that. But why? The problem is in the world in which you live, or, in other words, our world in which we all live. So what are the options? Well, why do you spend your energy? What is the problem which now exists but which didn't exist back then? Back then, many people were also focusing on their desires. The amount of morok, darkness, was not then less than it is now. What exists now, that didn't exist 1,000 years ago, because the events I'm talking about happened about 900 years ago. Sorry, what did you say? Yes, there is mass media. The media is the concept of influence on the world of man. Whether you want to believe it or not, it is the truth. the media influence and shape your worldview. Since your childhood, you all grew up with the TV. I don't think that you're the sort of people who would not have had a TV when you were growing up. Yes? You didn't have a TV? Well, what good karma? You are probably already a yoga teacher. How old are you? Soon 30. So this person who is 30 years old is already a yoga teacher. You woke up very quickly. The mass media is one thing. Telecommunications are another. It is a tool and a method of influencing consciousness. But are these things any different? As you know, I can only affect those people who have a karmic connection with me, as I said on the first day. If you can teach yoga, if you have the chance to become a yoga teacher, try to realize this chance. Why? Because theoretically, if you do not load up your mind with the passions of this world, if you aren't motivated by the desires of this world, do you understand the word motivation? When people had certain patterns of behavior imposed on them, you have to do this, you've got to do this, etc., etc. If a person has a lot of such motivations, the harder it will be to understand himself, because his mind will be motivated by these external factors, and with such a person, it's very difficult to deal with such a person. If a man does not accumulate so much of these motivating factors, then it is quite possible that he will quickly awaken and stand on the path of self-development. But nevertheless, even if he will stand on the path of self-development and becomes a good teacher, he will be able to help only those who have a direct karmic connection with him in past lives. Is it clear what I mean? I'll explain. If I'm a bad lecturer or a bad speaker, it's not really important, but I can be heard only by those who have encountered me in past lives somehow. Let's say that next to me sits some person who is better than me, but my students from the past lives will not understand him, even though he is a more intelligent, well-read, great speaker, and so on. But they don't feel anything from him, no essence. Therefore, only those whose time it is will be awakened. Do you understand?
Получается очень интересная вещь. Средства массовой информации – это инструмент. Нам промывают мозги, промывают активно, промывают неким негативом. Получается, они могут промыть мозги всем, а вы можете дать добро только части. Это какой-то дисбаланс. Во Вселенной, в общем-то, нет дисбаланса. Добро, оно как минимум...
You are looking only at the experience on this planet Earth, and only at this time. Let's look wider. Still on the same planet Earth, but suppose around 70,000 years into the future. There were times in the past when each forest had an ashram, which is the place for self-improvement. And people had a choice to develop themselves in different places, and it was a great choice for them to have. People lived in more cultural conditions. Now it's a stupid time, excuse my expression, where people have many chances to change themselves. They are provided with every opportunity. They may do yoga, well, they read about it in magazines. The leg behind the head. Oh, great. I'm just kidding, of course, but nevertheless, if such a person has prevalent desires, prevalent concepts like take everything from life, he will be washed down. And the mass media work on this. That is, they impose certain concepts that will reincarnate that person to pay their karmic debts. And we can't do anything about this. This is not a sorting station, this time of confusion. It is Mariti Loka now. That is this time. Those who have a chance to wake up, they will wake up. But whoever has the chance to wake up, but on the other hand also a chance to go down, they will get what they deserve. Because sometime 10 or 20,000 years ago, they missed the opportunity they had. At that time they put a seed in their inner world. That is, how to say it, they sold themselves cheaply, and now they have their result, the fruits of their deeds. And these fruits will transfer them for a re-education, and that's fine. Therefore, we do not have confrontation with the media and the elite that controls them. We grow different things in the same garden. They cultivate some plants, and we cultivate other plants. We have a kind of harmony, the same mechanism like a gear. One gear affects one thing, another gear affects another. Therefore, we don't conflict with them if they do not start it first. If, for example, we say that the mass media is bad, do you know what will happen according to the law of karma?
Что будет?
Обратка будет.
Какая?
Йога это плохо.
Как?
Вы же сами говорили, вы сняли сериал, где преподаватель йоги и проститутка.
Ну,
But bear in mind, it's not the government. The elite stand above the government. The government is under them.
это не власть, это надвластные структуры. Власть уже под ними находится.
Силы вам что-нибудь сделают, и вы собьетесь с пути. Один эгрегор отвлечет.
Ну,
The point
часть правды в
is,
ваших словах
if
есть,
they will
что
not work as sanitary inspectors,
они не будут работать
we
с
have to
законами.
work as
Нам придется
sanitary
работать с
inspectors.
законами.
We will have to take on their
Брать на
duties.
себя их обязанности.
But I don't
А
want
мне
to.
это совсем не
You
хочется.
see? Do you understand
Понимаете,
what
как
a
бы
sanitary inspector
заниматься,
is?
ассенизацией
The function of this person is
человек,
working with
функция
sewage.
работы с нечистотами.
That is,
То есть есть люди, которые с ним
there are
работают,
people who
и
work with it.
занимаются.
That's their job.
А,
You can use the word pastor, but it's a word from another planet, figuratively speaking. In yoga, it is called a teacher. Why do people become teachers and students? Why do you think? What are the possible reasons? Correct.
какая кармическая
What kind of karmic connection?
Какая? А вот
What?
Что-то там меняется. Или добро какое-то сделал. Просто добро.
тоже может быть.
Well, in general, the fact that all these people met in the past. First, they often become enemies when there's a person and his opponent. What is hostility? It's a concentration on something. When somebody says that someone is very bad, he creates a very strong concentration on this person. Due to this concentration, an exchange of energy takes place. In general, then, this man, if he is a practitioner, the one who concentrates on him in a negative way will be reincarnated often and very badly, because this is the rule. Okay, I'll try to explain. Shiva has the karmic connection with all manifested beings, manifested in this galaxy. He was supposed to be the father of all, but he did not become that. Therefore, Brahma became the father of all. And this is why he helps yogis and those who are climbing to the top. According to one opinion, he said, "I'm like an uncle to them." He's a kind of spiritual father. Even if the father is Brahma, Shiva helps those on the path of development. Now, there is such a thing as the law of karma. Everything we say, for example, someone has a nasty thought about someone or a bad relationship. Someone creates karma with someone else. If karma is created, then certain institutions come to manifest this karma to those who need it. The law is very strict, but it is necessary. Why? Because let's imagine there is a teacher, or yoga teacher. There is someone who, well, doesn't really like this teacher. He doesn't know why, he can't explain it logically, he just doesn't like him at all. There is a karmic connection created because of this concentration. And in this moment, he does something nasty to that yogi. Then it turns out that he intervenes in the activities of the teacher. Let's think, what does the teacher do? He is a knowledge giver, right? He brings knowledge to those people who are destined to more or less adequately develop. Now look, there is a person with karma. After all, he also had the karma to intervene. The only question is, at what level he will intervene and how, and during what period of life. If he intervenes, it will do harm to those other people who had the destiny to do yoga and be adequately reborn in the future after death. Is the logic clear? You didn't lose the thread? This person is responsible for all the negative consequences that the teacher's students will have. Therefore, it is believed that if anyone intervenes in the activities of any teacher, he gets not only the karma of the teacher, but also of all those students who did not realize their potential, those who were on their way and were born with this purpose. Well, from the point of view of physics, the teacher had, say, 10 kilograms of energy to give knowledge to others, but someone disrupts the group and causes a conflict, and the teacher loses several kilos of that energy. Can you understand this? He will be in purgatory for a very long time, due to the fact that he took upon himself the karma not only of this man, but all those who had to reincarnate. So the law of karma was created by Shiva. Shiva supports the law of justice. That is, he regulates it. If a creature appears that claims to take over all the functions and says, I'm the most important one, the coolest one, then Shiva has to intervene. Otherwise that coolest one can ruin everything. Well, it's clear that there is no way to get enough power or ambition in this world. And to restrain such ambitious people, there are certain institutions that exist. They are called demons, of course. But these demons are responsible for the balance of the world, to put it mildly. So you should not be afraid of anything if you already stand on the path of yoga. What do I mean by this? You are not selfish. Well, more correctly, of course, every one of you is a bit selfish. But at least you are making the effort to climb out of this onto the way of asceticism. So what do demons do? Demons come to the parasites who do not want to practice self-improvement and to make trouble for others. So they get lassoed and put in a frying pan at a temperature of about 300 degrees for the next 12 eons, for example. The one in the pan will get a full treatment. Yes, a long-lasting heat, so to speak. Well, that's yoga for you, my friends.
Поэтому, да, в чем вопрос?
Я вопрос по входе. Вот сейчас, как я от знакомых даже знаю, есть вот линии преемственности, сохранившиеся в наше время, карма-подъем. Есть, например, лама, ну, он европеец, да, периодически он проводит входы, так называемые. Что это вообще? Стоит ли туда ездить? Вот в июле будет...
Yes, of course. If a man says, I have some information and some technique, and you have the opportunity to try it, why not? You will check whether this technique is right or wrong from your own experience. So you have nothing to lose, you could say. You might lose some money, but believe me, money is not the most important thing. Money comes and money goes. If you will not do this, you will only invest this money into something less effective. Spending money on knowledge is the best investment you can make. It's the best capital investment. Ah, yes, yes. Ole Nudal.
Ну, не многие, не некоторые, а многие, даже скажу.
Нет, там тоже есть очень приличные люди. Вот как раз получается очень интересный вопрос. Они же претендуют, прошу прощения, они же претендуют на то, что только они несут то самое чистое, незамутненное знание.
I respect Lama Ole Nudal because he really does do some important things. That's a fact. Because with the audience that comes to his satsangs, I probably would have died after the first day, where he gathers together a very difficult type of people, tough people to work with, unfortunately. But he does an important thing. Of course. So I say, go and learn. If you have the karma to stay there, you will stay. It's nothing bad. If you don't have the karma to stay there, you will leave, but you can gain experience. It's quite simple. If a group of people is going its own way and you don't get along, so go the other way. Then go and seek your own path. So you will have a specific search. I was taught in my time certain things. My experience I got not from books, but in my own skin. A lot depends on the audience you are around. If your audience is mixed, the result will also be uneven, and it's better to choose the audience. The important thing is to learn not to transfer your consciousness, but at least raise your consciousness during this life a little bit. The audience of Ole Nudal is very difficult. I say once again.
Два вопроса можно? Первый вопрос, вот вы рассказывали про то, что если чувствовать энергию, то очень чувствуется, когда Мара вселяется, и когда он говорит, это относительно себя или тоже и на других тоже распространяется?
You can see and feel the change in another person. You can feel the energy of another person. If a person's energy is strongly pulling you down, it's not a normal man anymore. The voice changes a little. The eyes turn black. The eyes are a very good indicator. The pupil expands. It looks like a big black spot. But if you look carefully, you can see the expanded pupil. This means some wave is being transmitted through this person now. No smell? No, I've not experienced any smell. Mara is sophisticated. Try to understand. He does an important thing. I'm not saying that he's bad. Why talk bad about someone who is 1 billion times stronger than you? That's reckless, to put it mildly, yes? That's why I treat him with respect. He does important things for this world, because whoever is not destined to move up, they need to go down. Mara is responsible for this. Demons can say, yogis interfere in our plan. We have a plan, yeah. By the end of the year, 25 million people will be in the new frying pans. And you guys get in the way. Get lost. While we work on our plan, we will not leave. Indeed. Remember I told you about how demons send people to get fried in the pan? Do you know what the procedure is then? Probably you don't know. Those who were fried for a very long time start moving upwards in their development. And what experiences do they have to go through in order to get back to the human world? What do you think? Who was it giving them benefits by putting them into the pan? Who keeps the fire going? Of course, they are in the pan first, then they are under the pan, tap dancing. I'm just kidding. But this joke has some truth to it. So this is a very long path out of purgatory. And the person who stands in the way of yoga can meet the teacher again, but it will not be very soon. Perhaps many eons will have to pass, but then they will meet. The one who was a troublemaker will become a student, probably not the brightest one, a problematic student, because he actually lived in such a mess for a long time that he will not have any abilities. But he will try to learn, but not be massively smart. And his teacher will stroke his head saying, "Come on, little one, try to move forward a bit." And this is the perfection of a teacher, that he can endure the most stupid student. Try to do the same. In any yoga, where you have to go through asceticism and you have to make an effort, it's already positive. To swing your hands or to jump, it's not that important. Asceticism is good. Some people will say, "Come on, sweetheart, I'll give you a hug, and together we will disclose our soul to the whole universe. And we will throw out our energy, even if we don't have much of it. This energy will go and not come back in this lifetime. Maybe this energy will come back, but when? I have never met a follower of this theory from whom I would want to learn. Those who I met, I didn't want to learn from. Well, probably I did learn something. There are teachers from whom you can principally learn what not to do. Those I have met. I haven't met yet such teachers with such abilities.
Таких я встречал, но тех, которые бы действительно обладали чем-то другим, пока не встречал. Поэтому...
Please understand me. I'm not blaming anybody, because it makes no sense that these people were doing very important work. Try it for yourself to become a teacher for an audience. Every teacher gets bad energy from the audience, big time, whether you like it or not. Until you try it, you cannot properly understand. What are you confused about?
Почему? Ну, а вас-то что смущает?
Меня смущает, я как бы вижу, а другие-то люди не видят, и мне как бы жалко их. Не туда уводят людей.
The law of karma is impossible to change.
Вы понимаете?
I was also quite conservative before and condemned people, but at a certain stage came wisdom through my own experience. It's not a problem. Be glad that such teachers exist, those who lead people the wrong way. It's no problem. It's very good that his audience went with him. God forbid that the audience came to me. What would I do with them? And believe me, I know there are people who I would never want to see in my studio. They need other teachers. They will go the other way. Drugs, alcohol, they'll do anything. They have to have their own experience. In this world, everything is in harmony. I can't really explain it rationally, but everything in this world is in harmony, even if it looks strange. You say sect. Do you know what the largest sect is? There are some good people like you who speak according to templates. Right and wrong can only be according to their templates. If somebody modifies their perception of reality, do you think this is okay? In my opinion, a sect is a great school for those who are stubborn and who can't live any other way. I had a lot of debates with these people before, when a person became... but he was involved in nonsense. I argued with him, debated and called him a fool, told him that he didn't understand. Where are you going? Who are you following? And then I realized I was pulling from a rubbish tip, so to speak. Well, I'm sorry to say that, but energetical rubbish. Because usually such schools become like tips, because there are people who are interested. Yes, it's just my point of view. I could be mistaken, but for someone this could be their salvation. In general, it doesn't matter. No, wait a second, I will explain. I helped him. I pulled the man out, and he began more or less to live better. Then, a couple of days later, he fell into another pit, and it was all the same thing, just covered in a different sauce, if you like. I said to him, "What are you doing? Look at you." And then I realized that he feels, well, until he feels fed up, he will not stop. It's pointless. What is the point of me wasting time on someone who wants to get his own experience? Let him accumulate it. That is, you must understand, if a person has good karma, whatever sect he gets into, he will be fine. He will accumulate just as much as he needs to understand. But then he will be smart and will tell everyone about his experience, because people are divided into 4 categories. As Buddha said, I always tell the story. Perhaps I haven't told it to you yet. I will explain. The Buddha said that people can be divided like horses. Have you heard this story? Well, some maybe not. A horse is smart. It understands, due to its past lives, that there are certain problems. so it is better to listen to someone who is respectable. The respectable one, the master, says, "Horse, listen, summer's coming, and it will soon be winter. If we do not sow in the summer, we will not reap the harvest. In winter there will be nothing to eat, and we'll eat you. Do you understand?" Yes, indeed. So the horse goes, ploughs and sows, all is done, and everything is normal. But there's another type of horse, a stupid type of horse. The master says, winter, hunger, etc. But this horse says, "I understand, but I am very interested in other things, jumping around the meadow, etc." The master then shows the whip to the horse, and she understands everything, and then she goes and works, and then plays. The third category of horse is even more stupid. The beginning is the same, winter, hunger, whip, etc. But the horse still says, "I want to go and play." So she gets hit with the whip, then she goes ploughing, and everything is fine. And then the fourth category of horse, the horse that gets the explanation, gets beaten, but after a few moments of work, starts playing again. So this horse will get whipped until she finishes ploughing everything, so that she will not be eaten. I'm kidding, of course, about being eaten. Buddha didn't say that. Buddha gave a more affectionate example, of course. I'm just giving you a tougher version this time. But the sense is that if the person does not have a certain understanding of good and evil, the fastest way to learn is what is good and evil is to experience evil yourself, to see it for yourself. This means getting into big trouble, and the person will get into as much trouble as he needs to. And there's no problem in this, believe me. The world is in harmony. Everything is clear. There are 2 yoga studios near ours, and I'm glad that they are situated nearby. It's great because those people who don't want to come to us go there instead. Yes, Morok, darkness begins to occur. I'll explain. You have 2 hands, right and left. But they are parts of the same thing. They have one body. Let's say you and I, we are actually one and the same. But due to generated different experience, you have this body and you have this certain experience. I have a different body and a different experience. But actually, the Jivatma we have is one and the same, if we live in this galaxy together. And now imagine that one hand accidentally, in the darkness, touches the other hand. The other hand thinks, "This is lawlessness. I was not bothering anyone, and look what happened." And it thinks, "An eye for an eye, yes." And the other hand thinks, "Hey, I accidentally touched it a little bit and I get kicked." Does the other hand not understand that it hurts? It needs to know that it actually hurts. Take that. And so it turns out that this is the mechanism of the accumulation of karma. Because of the darkness, people do nasty things to each other. During the Golden Age, you were too lazy to work with yourself. Then it was explained in a good way, like in that story about the horse, but you didn't care. You were interested in other things. You did not want to get the knowledge. Now you are getting it 100% in this age of darkness. Did you not suffer in this life? Well, if so, it means that you didn't pass all the lessons. Okay, just kidding. That's right. Suffering is a cleanse. In the Russian language, starodavanie. Madam, do you hear? Madam, the word suffering translates as starodavanie, which means movement towards the light. Therefore, it is a good word. Yes. Masochism? No, it's not a form of masochism. Masochists perhaps once were ascetics due to their karma. But this asceticism was in terrible, strange things. Now, when Buddha Shakyamuni was looking for his way, he tried different teachers, and sometimes really, really terrible ones. Let me give you an example. What are masochists? Well, actually I won't. Think about it. The man makes a vow to himself. I will clench my fist, and I will not unclench it. So he clenches his fist, and he holds it until the nails have grown through the other side of his hand. They punctured the flesh. And here he is, standing with his hand up. And he's a saint now. Well, in India you can still find examples of this. I recently read a comment about a movie in India. A holy man stands under a tree with his hand raised, and he stands there for 50 years. Is this holy? Well, I don't know where the holiness is. Lavas? Yes, of course, they feed on suffering. The lava, through the suffering of the body, gets its jivatma. That's the motivation for lavas. There is an asana for overtrained legs. It is called Vajrasana, the position when you sit on your heels. As in martial arts, this position is called tate. Squeeze the knees together or spread them wide. There are variations. But if you sit for 15 minutes, you can already feel that it's happening. Yes? It's the best asana, because freeing the joints might otherwise take decades, especially if you live a social life. You get the experience that shows on your joints. You try and try, but then get pulled back. So cry. There are no other options. It is not only in your case. I know a lot of people in Moscow who got to a very high level in the martial arts. They believe that being an 8 dan is great, of course, but their bodies do not move properly. They are in pain, so they begin to practice yoga. So they engage in yoga in a proper way because such karma exists. To teach the students to smash each other's heads is not the best option. Well, in this case, the only option is to tolerate the pain. It's much worse if you work in a pub and all your life was spent helping people get drunk. Such specializations exist, or something similar. Martial arts is not bad. Why? Because even if you have problems with the body, they are much smaller in comparison to somebody who has, say, worked in the restaurant business. If such a person starts doing yoga, it will be 10 times more difficult than for someone who, through the martial arts, was collecting tapas. Because any martial art has an ascetic element to it. People have to tolerate discomfort, but it is not related to asanas. Apanavaya is very strong. Therefore, do Vajrasana and be patient. If possible, do all the asanas that you can perform. So, develop the body comprehensively. At the beginning it will be painful, of course, a lot, but then everything will be fine. Well, friends, that's the lecture. As usual, we were late, so I hope you will have time to have some food, and in general, everything will be okay.